stories for you guys today. First one, former federal correctional officer with the Federal Bureau of Prisons (BOP), Federal Correctional Institute of Petersburg, was sentenced to 54 months in prison for willfully making false statements to federal agents during a federal criminal civil rights investigation. He must have he must have actually had some dirt on somebody up high in his chain of command, or they really like this guy because he went from a sexual assault to a lying to a federal officer, and that's a big difference. The actual the uh, the line to a federal officer is the 5 year sentence, where a sexual assault could be up to life. So apparently, on February 12th, the jury convicted Chikoski, that's his first name, 41, of willfully making material false statements to federal investigators during their investigation of allegations that he had sexually assaulted a prisoner by the initials BL on 2 occasions. Specifically, the jury found that Chikoski denied that he had engaged in a sexual act with any inmate at any time at that facility, and that he lied about what he was doing with BL in an unattended office in the prison at the time. BL said that Chikoski had assaulted him. The jury acquitted him of 1 count of depriving BL of his civil rights, 1 count of aggravated sexual assault, and 2 counts of sexual abuse of a ward. So I stand corrected. I guess he did get acquitted from that. So they got on the line then. Okay, they must have not had their something went wrong there. He abused the power of authority of his office to mislead law enforcement. When confronted by federal agents about the alleged abuse, he lied repeatedly and emphatically. His abuse and obstructions were a complete reject of his law enforcement oath. And this prosecution today, they couldn't prove it though. So apparently, so this is the actual the allegation. They heard the evidence of on one occasion, uh, Chikoski led BL into an unmonitored staff office area of the prison after staff in the office had left for the day. Chikoski told federal investigators that he and BL were engaged in a conversation while Chikoski tried to use a computer printer in the office. But a BOP computer expert testified that computer records show that no one had attempted to use the computer in question at the time. Evidence presented at trial included a testimony of a DNA expert who testified that DNA matches Chikoski had been recovered from the victim and from the victim's clothing. Whoa. So that means that after the assault, this actual inmate went to another correctional officer, reported the assault, and they took him so serious enough that they gathered DNA evidence. They didn't try to cover it up. They didn't try to throw it in the laundry. They didn't try to get this guy in the showers or anything. They actually took him serious, and they took him to, I guess, the ward, the medical ward, because they gathered DNA, and he still didn't get. He got acquitted. I'm telling you, something's behind that. So it's more. There's more to the story than this. This next one here, is just wrong all the way around, and I'll point out the actual facts that are actually that should not never happen. Okay, here we go. Former private prisoner transport officer sentenced to life plus 5 years for sexually assaulting 2 women in his custody. So apparently, this Eric, this 53-year-old, a former private prisoner transport, um, he was actually accused, and he was actually found guilty of sexually assaulting 2 different women in his custody during 2 different transports in 2014 and 2017, and for knowingly possession of firearms in furtherance of the actual 2017 sexual assault. What that means is that uh, the the actual victim might have actually challenged him and 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 try to fight him, and he used his gun to actually to calm the actual victim down. And the actual sentence comes after the guilty verdict. The evidence at trial established that Eric operated his own private prisoner transport company that contracted with local jails throughout the country, the country, to transport individuals who were arrested on out-of-state warrants. So basically, just says that he's just sending them back to where they're actually their warrant is out of. You know what I mean? If they get busted in California, but your warrant's out of Denver, they're gonna send you somebody has to transport you to Denver, right? So it's just cheaper to run it this way, I guess. But first of all, okay, here we go. So even though the indictment charged Eric with only 2 sexual assaults that occurred within the jurisdiction of the Eastern District of Arkansas, the jury heard from 6 women who he transported between 2012 and 2017. All the women testified that Eric transported them alone, sometimes for hundreds of miles. The women were all handcuffed and shackled as Eric drove the women to a desolate location. He threatened to kill them and made sexual explicit comments that escalated in intensity and depravity. So this guy, from the get-go, he already had this already planned. This is already was going to happen for the fact that he didn't have a partner with him. How are you going to travel hundreds of miles without a partner, without switching actual drivers? One, for the safety of these actual, what if you have to use the restroom within them 100 miles? Who's going to watch the actual prisoner for you? You can't just leave him in the vehicle. Two, to avoid these actual types of situations and accusations. Just for that by itself, right? But he knew he already had this already in his plan already, right? And so actually when we transported any kind of actual any kind of inmate or any kind of actual uh, somebody detained, there had to be 2 of us no matter what, especially when you're transporting females. And then it states one of the women listed in the indictment testified that Eric transported her from Alabama to Arizona in 2017. He stopped his van in a deserted area near Little Rock, purportedly to allow her to urinate. There, he sexually assaulted her while she was handcuffed, threatened her with a firearm, and reminded her, as he did with other victims, that she was an inmate in transport and that no one would believe her if she reported what happened. Another woman listed that the indictment testified that Eric transported her in 2014. He stopped his van in a deserted area in also in Arkansas under the guise of having gotten lost. There he violently forced her to perform a sex act on him. A third woman testified during her transport in 2013 from Florida to Texas. Eric pulled his van over to the side of the actual dark road, both purportedly to let her urinate and under the guise of having gotten lost. Eric sexually assaulted her. A fourth woman, testified that during her transport in 2012 from Nevada to California, he stopped his van in a deserted hiking area. There, he forced her to perform a sex act on him in a park bathroom. A fifth woman testified that during the transport 2013 from California to Montana, he attempted to sexually assault her after he pulled over the side of the road during a snowstorm. See, that's another one. That's another reason you would have to have somebody with you. None of the women knew each other, and it was only during the trial that they learned the other existed. So it wasn't a conspiracy, but in other words. And according to court documents, the federal investigation into Eric's conduct began in 2017 when two women housed together in a small jail in Arizona reported that Eric sexually assaulted them during two separate transports. The year-long investigation thereafter uncovered 16 women who the defendants subjected to some form of sexual misconduct during transport. 16, often culminating in forced sexual assault. Wow, man, that's a lot. That he went on too long. You know what I mean? And I wonder who actually tried to say something earlier and they just didn't pay attention. But that right there is suspect when he chose to go by himself on these transports. He already had nefarious. He already had bad intentions. Oh, and then also this month, this young, I think he was 22 years old. He actually got charged with importing a child sex doll, and he got 3 years. They wanted more time, but it's only a sex doll, so it's the first in its kind, it's first in its actual category. He got 3 years in prison and has to register as a sex offender for importing a child sex doll from overseas. And he must have been putting his business out there because the feds found out and they hemmed him up and got him 3 years. It's one of a kind. First of its kind, I have to say. Okay, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe.